Welcome to a quiet night of ghostly tales. As the world slows down, we'll drift through haunted places and restless spirits, carried softly by stories meant to guide you into sleep. Do you believe ghosts are echoes of the past, or something still watching us now? Let me know your thoughts, and together, let's step into the whispers of the unknown. Tonight we begin with one of the most enduring legends of the supernatural world, a tale told on lonely roads and quiet highways in every corner of the globe. It is the story of the vanishing hitchhiker, the mysterious passenger who appears suddenly in the glow of headlights, only to disappear just as quickly, leaving drivers shaken and forever changed. This is not a single story with one ending. It is a collection of countless whispers, each carrying the same haunting pattern, passed down from generation to generation. Picture the scene. A driver makes their way along a long stretch of road. The night is cool, the trees sway against a dim sky, and the world feels empty except for the hum of the engine and the rhythm of tires on pavement. Then out of the darkness, a figure appears. Sometimes it is a young woman in pale clothing, sometimes a soldier with tired eyes, sometimes just a shadowy shape that lifts its arm for a ride. The driver slows, concerned for the safety of a stranger wandering in the night, and offers them a seat. For a while there is conversation, sometimes silence, sometimes just the heavy feeling that someone has entered the car who does not belong to the living. And before the destination is ever reached, the passenger vanishes, leaving behind no trace, no sound, not even the click of a door. This is the heart of the vanishing hitchhiker story, the timeless, ghostly encounter that travelers have reported for centuries. It is as though the roads themselves are haunted, carrying memories of lives lost, tragedies never resolved, and souls unable to move on. Every retelling is slightly different, yet the feeling is always the same. A sudden chill, the brief hope of helping another person, and then the shock of finding the seat empty. One of the oldest written accounts of this legend dates back to the early 20th century, though many believe the tale is far older, whispered long before it was ever put to paper. The most familiar form usually speaks of a young woman in white. She appears on a quiet road, often late at night, her presence fragile, almost dreamlike. Drivers pick her up, sometimes taking her to an address she requests, often the home of her parents. When the driver knocks on the door, ready to explain that their daughter is waiting outside, the family responds with sorrow. Their daughter died years ago, often in an accident, on the very road where she was found. Other versions add chilling details. Some say the phantom leaves behind a scarf, a shawl, or even a piece of jewelry on the seat, only for it to vanish as soon as it is touched. Others say she disappears with a scream when the car passes by the cemetery where she is buried. In some cases, the driver feels the temperature drop and glances in the rearview mirror to see an empty space where the figure once sat. The car feels heavier for a moment, the air thick, until finally everything is still again. There is something strangely human in this story. Unlike tales of violent hauntings or monstrous figures, the vanishing hitchhiker seems almost gentle. She is not there to harm, but to remind us of the fragile line between life and death. Her presence is sorrowful, a memory repeating itself endlessly as if she is still searching for a safe way home. That search may be why her story has lasted so long. We recognize the fear, yes, but also the sadness. In every retelling, she is lost, needing help. And though we cannot guide her to peace, we listen and pass her story along, keeping her spirit alive. Some folklorists argue that this legend grew as cars became a common part of everyday life. Before automobiles, There were stories of phantom travelers appearing on horseback paths or near rivers, always asking for passage before vanishing. But in the modern world, the highway became the stage for this age-old ghostly drama. A long stretch of empty road at night, the sudden flash of headlights, catching something pale, the silence that follows when the journey ends too soon. It is the perfect setting for a spirit to appear, halfway between memory and dream. The first drivers who told these stories often described them with trembling voices. They were not looking for fame or attention. Instead, they spoke as if they had experienced something real, something they could not explain. Even skeptics admit there is a consistency to these accounts that is hard to ignore. Across cultures, across generations, the same story repeats. A figure appears, a ride is given, and then the figure fades away as though they were never there at all. Drivers often recall the first moment of doubt when something feels unusual about their strange passenger. Perhaps the hitchhiker's clothes are out of date, as though they belong to another era. Perhaps the passenger speaks in a soft voice that feels out of place, asking questions in a way that sounds rehearsed, as if drawn from another time. Some tell of cold air drifting through the car even with the window shut tight, or of headlights flickering for no reason. These details may seem small, but in the quiet of the night, they become unforgettable. One common element is the setting. The vanishing hitchhiker rarely appears in the bright hours of day. She waits on lonely highways, shadowed country roads, and stretches of asphalt where few cars pass. The air is usually heavy with mist or rain. Sometimes the legend places her near a cemetery, other times near a curve in the road where many accidents have happened. In each telling, the surroundings feel like a warning. Drivers sense that they are entering a place where the boundary between worlds is thin. Folklorists have long collected these stories, writing them down in newspapers, magazines, and eventually books. Some were skeptical, suggesting that these tales were nothing more than campfire stories dressed in modern clothes. Yet the sheer number of reports made it difficult to dismiss. From small towns to large cities, from highways in America to country roads in Europe and beyond, drivers insisted they had picked up a passenger who was not truly alive. The story spread so widely that by the mid-20th century, it was one of the most recognized pieces of urban legend around the world. Take, for example, a famous account from the 1930s in Chicago. A young woman was said to appear along Archer Avenue, dressed in a light-colored gown. She was friendly but quiet, always asking to be taken to the ballroom where she had been dancing before her untimely death. Drivers who agreed would later find her gone, the seat empty, the car door still locked. She came to be known as Resurrection Mary, one of the most famous vanishing hitchhiker stories ever told in the United States. Her legend continues even now, with people still claiming to see her wandering along that road. But Resurrection Mary is not alone. Similar tales exist in countless communities. Some speak of a soldier returning from war, tired and weary, who disappears before reaching home. Others recall an elderly man walking the highway who fades into nothing as the driver tries to offer help. The phantom is not always a woman in white. Sometimes he is young, sometimes old, but always there is the same pattern: a ride offered, a brief companionship, and then sudden absence. Why does this story linger so strongly in our imagination? Perhaps because it plays on a simple human instinct. Most of us want to help a stranger in need. The act of pulling over to offer a ride feels like kindness, a small rescue in the dark. But when the person vanishes, that kindness is met not with gratitude, but with mystery and fear. The driver is left with unanswered questions. Who were they really? Why did they appear? Were they a ghost, a dream, or something far more mysterious. In some accounts, the phantom hitchhiker speaks very little, as if her words are borrowed from a memory she can no longer fully recall. In others, she is warm and polite, blending in almost perfectly until the moment she disappears. And then there are the rare stories where the passenger gives a warning. She tells the driver to be careful on the road ahead or to avoid a certain turn. When the driver listens, they often discover that the warning saved them from danger. In these cases, the vanishing hitchhiker is not just a lost soul, but a guardian, a spirit determined to keep others from sharing her fate. Not every telling is so comforting. Some drivers recall a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread as the figure enters the car. Instead of warmth or sorrow, there's only silence and the chilling feeling of being watched. They drive faster, eager to reach the destination, only to find the passenger gone when they dare to glance behind them. These darker versions suggest that not every hitchhiker is friendly, and not every spirit wanders with good intentions. The unknown nature of the encounter is what makes it so haunting. You never truly know who you have welcomed into your car until it is too late. What makes the vanishing hitchhiker especially fascinating is how the story mirrors the time in which it is told. In the early days of cars, she was often dressed in long skirts or old-fashioned clothing, reflecting the fashions of the era. As decades passed, she appeared in modern dresses, casual clothes, or uniforms, adapting to the age but never losing her sorrowful presence. The story grows with us, shifting its details to remain believable to every new generation of listeners. Even skeptics admit that there is something enduring about this legend. Whether or not the drivers truly saw what they believed, the consistency across countless cultures suggests a deeper thread. It is as though humanity carries this story within itself, passing it along like a memory that refuses to die. The vanishing hitchhiker may be a ghost, a dream, or a symbol of our fears. But whatever she is, she remains one of the most enduring travelers of the night. Across the ocean, in the winding roads of Europe, the vanishing hitchhiker takes on new shapes, yet follows the same haunting rhythm. In Spain, many speak of the Dama de Blanco, the lady in white. She is said to appear along mountain passes, her pale dress glowing faintly under the moonlight. Drivers stop to help, and for a time she sits quietly, speaking little, her eyes filled with sadness. Then, just before they reach the village she names, she vanishes into thin air, leaving only the scent of perfume or a lingering chill in the air. Some say she is the spirit of a bride who died on her wedding night, still wandering the road she once traveled with hope in her heart. In Portugal, there are stories of a woman who asks to be dropped off at a particular house. When the driver arrives, she disappears, and the family inside reveals she died in a car accident years before. In Ireland, tales of spectral passengers blend with ancient traditions of the banshee, warning of death and loss. The names change, the settings shift, but the story remains eerily familiar. Travel farther east, and the legend continues. In the Philippines, drivers tell of ghostly women appearing on Ballet Drive in Quezon City. Locals warn of a white-clad figure who enters taxis late at night, only to vanish before reaching her destination. Some say she is the restless soul of a woman who met a tragic end on that very road. In Singapore, on stretches of highway lined with jungle, motorists whisper of passengers who suddenly appear in the back seat, their faces hidden, their bodies soaked as if they drowned, only to disappear before the driver can speak a word. Even in Africa, where the landscapes and cultures are vastly different, the legend finds a home. Long roads stretching across rural areas become the stage for phantoms who walk alongside vehicles or request rides, In some accounts, they appear not to vanish, but to guide, pointing travelers away from danger, only to disappear once safety is reached. What binds all these stories together is not coincidence, but something deeper. It is as though the vanishing hitchhiker exists in the collective imagination of humanity. Every culture has its lonely roads. Every country has its stories of unexpected travelers. And in each telling, the mysterious passenger fades away as if reminding us that the road belongs not only to the living, but also to those who once lived. The symbolism within these stories is as compelling as the details themselves. To some, the vanishing hitchhiker represents unfinished business, the souls of those who died suddenly and violently, still trying to reach home. To others, she embodies the dangers of the road, a warning to travelers that death may be closer than they realize. Driving at night has always carried unease. The darkness limits vision. The silence magnifies every sound, and the vast emptiness leaves the mind open to fear. The phantom passenger could be seen as the embodiment of that fear, a reminder that accidents happen quickly and lives can end in an instant. There are also gentler interpretations. Some folklorists suggest that the vanishing hitchhiker is a symbolic bridge between worlds. The act of giving a ride to the dead reflects the compassion we show to strangers, even in the most uncertain circumstances. The driver becomes part of the ghost's final journey, carrying them a little closer to peace. It is a ritual of kindness, repeated endlessly in story after story, even if the passenger never truly reaches their destination. The persistence of this legend also reflects our fascination with the moment of disappearance. To witness someone vanish is to confront the impossible. One moment, the person is there, physical, real, breathing. The next, they are gone, leaving nothing but memory. It is a chilling reminder of how fragile our perception of reality can be. If a person can vanish before our eyes, what else about the world might slip away without warning? In many retellings, the vanishing hitchhiker is tied to themes of love and loss. The young bride who died before reaching her wedding, the soldier who never made it back home, the child who was lost on a dark road. These figures return not with anger, but with longing. They ride quietly, hoping for something that was taken from them, whether it is family, safety, or simply the comfort of being alive. When they vanish, it is as if they are drawn back into the silence of death, unable to stay among the living no matter how much they try. And yet, the story is not always sad. For some, the encounter becomes a spiritual moment, a brush with the unknown that changes the way they see the world. Drivers often describe feeling humbled afterward, as if reminded that life is fleeting and every journey is fragile. Others say they feel strangely comforted, as though the ghost's presence was not meant to frighten, but to remind them they are not alone on the road. What is striking is how the details shift to suit the time and place, but the heart of the story never changes. Whether on the highways of America, the mountain roads of Spain, the jungled streets of Asia, or the open landscapes of Africa, the vanishing hitchhiker walks the same path, always appearing to those who least expect it. The car is her stage, the road her eternal home, and the act of vanishing her final reminder that some journeys never truly end. As the years move forward, the vanishing hitchhiker did not fade into history. If anything, she adapted, finding her way into new roads and new technologies. In the age of the internet, stories of phantom passengers now spread more quickly than ever before. Online forums, social media threads, and late-night radio shows are filled with drivers who claim they have seen something they cannot explain. Though skeptics dismiss these tales as tricks of exhaustion or imagination, the voices of those who believe they encountered a ghost remain steady, carrying the legend into the present. One driver described picking up a young man late at night on a rural highway. The stranger was quiet, almost too quiet, answering questions with short nods. He asked to be dropped off at a certain crossroad. When the driver looked back, the seat was empty. Confused and shaken, the driver checked the road behind him. No one was there. When he later told his story at a local diner, others nodded knowingly. That road had a reputation. Years earlier, a man had died there in a terrible crash. Another account surfaced from a long-haul truck driver. He had been traveling through the desert when he spotted a woman waving at the side of the road. She wore a long, flowing dress that seemed strangely old-fashioned. He slowed down, feeling uneasy, but unwilling to leave someone stranded in the heat. For several minutes, he drove with her, sitting silently in the passenger seat. Then, just as he glanced in the side mirror, she was gone. The door never opened. The truck never stopped. He drove the rest of the night with the uneasy sense that the desert was filled with ghosts he could not see. Modern technology has even captured hints of these strange passengers. Dash-cam videos occasionally circulate online, showing flickering figures by the roadside or strange silhouettes appearing briefly in the headlights. Some are explained as reflections, camera glitches, or even clever editing, but others leave viewers unsettled, as if they are watching something genuinely unearthly step into the path of the living. Even in an age where every moment can be recorded, the vanishing hitchhiker remains elusive, refusing to reveal herself completely. Perhaps that is why the legend continues to thrive. It is not simply a story about a ghost. It is a reflection of our deepest uncertainties. Night driving has always carried its own kind of tension. The road stretches endlessly, the lights of home are far away, and the mind begins to wander. In that silence, a figure at the roadside feels like more than chance. It feels like a message, a reminder that death walks close beside life, just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to appear. The vanishing hitchhiker legend also endures because it is endlessly adaptable. In rural towns, she is a lonely farm girl who died in an accident. In cities, she is a partygoer stranded after a late night, only to vanish before reaching home. On military bases, she is a soldier who never made it back from war. Each new generation reshapes the details to make the story feel fresh, and yet the pattern remains timeless. This is not just one ghost. This is an idea that follows us, haunting the spaces between travel and memory. Some believe the legend is not only about ghosts, but about us. To see someone vanish is to confront the fleeting nature of life itself. One moment, a person is with us. The next, they are gone. The phantom passenger becomes a mirror of grief, echoing the way loved ones are lost suddenly, without explanation, leaving behind only silence. The story may comfort us by turning that loss into something visible, giving shape to the feelings that haunt our hearts. Yet for all the theories, the vanishing hitchhiker remains an unsolved mystery. No one can say for certain why so many people, across so many cultures, tell the same story with such conviction. If it is imagination, then why do the details align so closely? If it is folklore, why does it adapt so seamlessly into modern times? And if it is real, then what does that mean for the world we think we know? Imagine yourself again on a quiet road at night. The trees arch above, their branches swaying in the wind. The hum of your car is steady, comforting. But then, in the distance, you see her. A figure standing by the side of the road, hand raised, waiting. You slow down. The headlights wash over her face, pale and still. She steps inside, sits down without a word, and for a while you drive together, two souls sharing a journey through the dark. And then, when you finally glance to your side, the seat is empty as if she was never there. That is the story that countless travelers carry with them, the memory that lingers long after the ride is over, whether ghost, spirit, dream, or something we cannot name. The vanishing hitchhiker remains one of the most haunting companions of the night. Her footsteps echo across highways and country roads, across continents and generations, whispering the same reminder over and over again. The dead are never as far away as we think. And so the legend of the vanishing hitchhiker is not only a tale of fear, but also of connection. She is the passenger who reminds us that life is brief, that kindness matters even in the face of the unknown, and that the road is filled with mysteries we may never truly solve. Drivers will continue to tell of her presence. Families will continue to share the story, and somewhere, on a quiet night, another traveler may see her waiting, hand raised, asking for one more ride. America has always been a land of long roads and restless travelers. Highways stretch endlessly across deserts, through forests, past farmland, and into cities that never seem to sleep. But with those miles of open road come stories, tales whispered among truckers, shared at late-night diners, and passed down in local communities. These highways are not just paths of asphalt and paint. To many, they are haunted corridors where the past lingers and where ghostly passengers sometimes appear for one final ride. Perhaps the most famous of these passengers is known as Resurrection Mary. Her legend has circled through Chicago for nearly a century, becoming one of the most iconic American ghost stories. Mary is said to appear along Archer Avenue, often near the gates of Resurrection Cemetery. Drivers describe her as a young woman with light-colored hair, dressed in a pale gown that shimmers faintly in the headlights. She waves for a ride, her presence both vulnerable and strangely compelling. Those who stop to help her find that she is quiet, almost shy, yet her sadness is unmistakable. Sometimes she asks to be taken to a nearby ballroom where she once danced the night away. In other versions, she simply sits silently, her eyes cast down, her hands folded in her lap. For a time, everything feels ordinary. She is just another passenger, a young woman trying to get home. But the moment the car passes Resurrection Cemetery, she vanishes. One blink, one quick glance away, and she's gone, leaving behind only the echo of her presence. Stories of Mary began surfacing in the 1930s, with countless witnesses claiming to have seen her. Some spoke of nearly hitting her with their cars as she stepped into the road, only to watch her vanish on impact. Others claimed to dance with her at the ballroom she loved, only to find her cold to the touch, disappearing when the night ended. What makes Mary's story so powerful is not just its persistence, but the sheer number of people who swear they encountered her. She is more than legend in Chicago. She has become a symbol of the city's haunted history, a reminder that even in a bustling metropolis, the past can linger in the most ordinary places. But Resurrection Mary is only one of many ghostly passengers haunting American highways. Across the country, drivers share similar stories. On lonely stretches of Route 66, the historic road that carried generations westward, travelers speak of shadowy figures who appear at the roadside, thumbing for a ride. Sometimes they are dressed like drifters from the 1930s, sometimes like soldiers from World War II, sometimes like ordinary hitchhikers who seem too real to ignore. Drivers slow down, their hearts pounding. But when they look again, the figure is gone. Others claim to let them inside, only to watch the seat empty before the journey ends. The desert roads of the Southwest are particularly rich with these tales. Out here, the land is wide, the silence deep, and the horizon stretches without end. At night, the stars shine brilliantly, but the darkness between them feels endless. It is on these roads that truckers and motorists whisper about encounters with passengers who never should have been there. A soldier with dusty boots appears near an abandoned base, climbing into the cab with a tired smile, only to disappear miles later. A woman in a long dress waits near a forgotten town, her presence heavy with sorrow, leaving the drivers shaken and unsure of what they saw. American highways are uniquely suited to such legends. They are places of transition, where people leave one world behind and move toward another. They are filled with accidents, farewells, beginnings, and endings. For those who died suddenly on these roads, perhaps the highway itself became their final home. To this day, many drivers insist that the empty seats beside them have been filled, if only for a few fleeting miles, by those who never made it to their destination. Picture yourself driving down Route 66 late at night, the road stretching endlessly before you, the glow of your headlights carving out a narrow path through the darkness. The radio hums low, maybe just static filling the silence, and the desert air outside is cool but heavy. This is the kind of place where legends grow, where lonely drivers swear they've picked up passengers who were never really there. Route 66, sometimes called the Main Street of America, is one of the most haunted highways in the United States. Stretching across deserts, small towns, and forgotten stretches of land, it carries not only the weight of history, but also the restless energy of travelers who never reach their destination. One of the most famous tales involves a young woman in a white dress, often described as appearing suddenly on the side of the road, waving her arm for a ride. Drivers pull over, feeling a mix of curiosity and compassion, and invite her inside. She sits quietly, speaking little, sometimes not at all, before pointing out a spot up ahead. But when they arrive, she vanishes, leaving only an empty seat and the faint trace of perfume. Some say she's the spirit of a bride killed on her wedding night. Others believe she was a traveler who died in a car accident. What remains constant is her presence, an echo replaying again and again under the neon skies of Route 66. Stories like these reveal something about American highways themselves. They are not just stretches of asphalt and paint. They are veins running across the body of the land. Every mile holds stories of lives lived and lost, and sometimes those stories refuse to end. Take, for example, the tale of Resurrection Mary in Chicago. She is perhaps the most famous vanishing hitchhiker in America, and her legend continues to capture imaginations to this day. Resurrection. Mary's story begins near Resurrection Cemetery, southwest of the city. Drivers have reported seeing her since the 1930s, usually late at night, walking along Archer Avenue. She is often described as a young woman with blonde hair, dressed in a light-colored party gown, sometimes with a shawl around her shoulders. Most say she looks real enough, not at all ghostly, and she asks for a ride. She's polite, even charming, chatting softly with the driver, until suddenly she asks to be let out near the cemetery gates. As the car slows, she vanishes into thin air, leaving behind confusion and a lingering chill. What makes Mary's story particularly chilling is the consistency of the details. Over the decades, countless drivers, cabbies, and passers-by have described the same figure. Some even claim to have danced with her at nearby ballrooms before she disappeared, only to discover later that no such girl existed among the living. Her presence has become a fixture of local lore, a reminder that certain spirits are bound to a place, unable to move on, replaying the same journey through eternity. The highways of America seem to hold more than their fair share of these ghostly passengers. From the deserts of New Mexico to the wooded highways of the Northeast, stories repeat themselves in strange patterns. A young woman, stranded on the road, a driver filled with pity, a ride given in kindness, and then the sudden realization that kindness was offered to someone no longer alive. It's as if the road itself demands these stories, weaving them into its asphalt and reflecting them back to travelers. Another haunting comes from Justice, Illinois, not far from Resurrection Mary's haunt. Cab drivers have long whispered about the toll these encounters take on them. One taxi driver in the 1970s described picking up a girl matching Mary's description. She gave him an address and spoke briefly about how she enjoyed dancing. But when he pulled up to the house, the girl was gone, and a woman answering the door explained that her daughter had died years earlier in a tragic accident. For the driver, it was not just a brush with the supernatural. It was a reminder that the past is never truly gone when the road keeps carrying it forward. American highways have a way of blending the ordinary with the extraordinary. Every driver has felt that strange tension on a long night, drive the sense that you're not entirely alone, that the shadows just beyond your headlights are hiding something. Ghostly hitchhikers tap into that fear perfectly. They are familiar enough to make you believe, and strange enough to unsettle you once the truth reveals itself. They remind us that journeys don't always end when the body does, and sometimes the spirit clings to the open road, waiting for a stranger to come along and give them one last ride. Highways invite not just the living, but also the lingering. For truckers, who spend much of their lives rolling down endless stretches of asphalt, ghostly passengers are almost an occupational hazard. Many long-haul drivers swap stories at rest stops about strange encounters on desolate roads, sometimes sharing them with a laugh, other times in a hushed voice, as if speaking too loudly might summon the presence back again. One of the most unsettling accounts comes from a trucker traveling through Arizona late at night. He noticed a woman standing on the roadside, alone in the desert, her figure illuminated in the glow of his headlights. At first he assumed she was a stranded traveler. He pulled over, but when he stepped out of the cab, the figure was gone. Thinking he had simply imagined her, he climbed back inside and continued. Minutes later, he glanced into the rearview mirror and saw her sitting in a sleeper berth behind him, watching silently. The sight rattled him so deeply that he nearly lost control of the rig. By the time he managed to stop, the apparition was gone once again. Stories like these ripple through the trucker community, passed along as warnings, but also as reminders that the road is never empty, even when it looks that way. Another famous tale echoes along the highways of North Carolina. On a stretch near Jamestown, locals tell of a ghostly hitchhiker named Lydia. Her story dates back to the 1920s, when a young woman was said to have died in a car accident on her way home from a dance. Drivers still report seeing her on stormy nights, standing near a bridge in her party dress. She asks for a ride home, and when drivers stop at the address she gives, they are told that Lydia died decades ago. The pattern is so well known that it has become woven into the identity of the town itself, and the bridge where she is most often seen has become a destination for curious seekers of the paranormal. These tales are not confined to small towns or lonely highways either. Even near bustling cities, the pattern repeats. On the outskirts of Los Angeles, there are whispers about a woman who appears along Pacific Coast Highway, stepping into the road as if desperately seeking help. Drivers who stop find no one there. Some say she is the spirit of a woman lost to a car crash on the twisting coastal roads, forever replaying the moment of seeking rescue that never came. Part of what makes these stories so captivating is their repetition across states and decades. They follow a rhythm, like the white lines flashing beneath a car's headlights, the lonely road, the mysterious passenger, the sudden disappearance. Why does this pattern appear again and again? Perhaps because the road itself represents transition between places, between lives, even between worlds. To travel a highway at night is to exist in a liminal space, neither fully here nor there. Ghosts, it seems, find this space just as inviting as the living do. Consider the accounts from the Bluegrass State, where truckers have long whispered about a vanishing man on Kentucky's rural highways. Unlike the elegant young women in many of these stories, this hitchhiker is described as rugged, sometimes with mud-streaked clothes or a worn hat, as if he had been walking the roads for weeks. He climbs into the cab, sits heavily, and after a few miles, disappears without a word. Some drivers believe he is the spirit of a traveler who died during the Dust Bowl migrations, his body never claimed, his soul still wandering the highways in search of rest. Modern accounts, too, keep the legend alive. In the age of GPS and cell phones, you might expect ghostly hitchhikers to fade away, relics of a time when drivers were more isolated and roads less crowded. Yet the opposite seems true. Online forums are filled with truckers and late-night travelers sharing uncanny encounters. One driver in Texas wrote of a girl in jeans and a hoodie standing by the shoulder. He offered her a ride, and she sat quietly for several miles before saying she needed to get out near an overpass. He slowed the car, but when he turned to look, the seat was empty. He later learned that a fatal accident had occurred at that very overpass years earlier. There's something profoundly human in these tales. They speak to our instinct to help, to slow down and offer a stranger kindness, even in the darkness. And they remind us that kindness sometimes reaches beyond the living, brushing against souls caught between worlds. The highway becomes not just a road, but a stage where the living and the dead meet, even if only for a brief, mysterious ride. Why do these tales linger so strongly along American highways? Perhaps it's because highways themselves are symbols of movement and transition. They carry people between homes, between jobs, between chapters of life. And for those whose lives ended suddenly along these stretches of road, their spirits may have found themselves bound to the very place of their final journey. Highways, with their ceaseless motion, become corridors where echoes of the past drift beside us, unseen yet deeply felt. There is also something deeply unsettling about the act of giving a stranger a ride. It is a gesture of trust, a moment when two lives intersect under fragile circumstances. In ghostly hitchhiker stories, that trust is twisted into a haunting encounter, where the act of kindness is rewarded not with thanks, but with mystery. These stories leave drivers questioning their senses, wondering if they were brushed by the supernatural or simply caught in a trick of the mind. And yet the details are often too vivid, too consistent across time and place, to be dismissed entirely as imagination. Take the case of Pearl Harbor's Nuuanu-Pali Highway in Hawaii. Local drivers have long reported a ghostly woman who appears near the cliffs, dressed in old-fashioned clothing. Some connect her to the spirits of warriors who once fought in the area, others to a woman who leapt from the cliffs in despair. Drivers who stop for her sometimes claim she enters their car, only to vanish when the vehicle nears the Pali Lookout. Her presence blends personal tragedy with cultural memory, a reminder that highways don't just connect destinations, but also the histories embedded in the land itself. Then there is the unsettling notion that these stories adapt to their environment. In the deserts of the Southwest, the ghostly passenger is often described as a weary traveler, sometimes barefoot, sometimes cloaked in shadows, fitting the rugged isolation of the land. In the Midwest, the specter often takes the form of a young woman in a dress, a symbol of innocence cut short in a car accident or sudden tragedy. And along coastal highways, the passenger sometimes appears drenched, as if pulled from the sea. Each region seems to give shape to its own restless spirits, tailored by the character of the road itself. Psychologists might argue that these tales are born from fatigue, the tricks of the human mind under stress. Driving late into the night, our eyes play games with the darkness, turning shadows into figures, reflections into movement. The monotony of the road can create illusions that feel startlingly real. Yet, even if that is the case, it raises another question. Why do so many drivers across decades and regions report the same type of encounter? Why do the stories converge into the same familiar rhythm? It suggests something deeper than chance. Culturally, ghostly hitchhiker stories also mirror our fears and values. They warn us of the dangers of the road, of accidents, and of lives cut short. But they also reflect compassion, the instinct to stop, to help, to show kindness even in uncertain circumstances. The very act of reaching out to another being, even when it leads to an eerie revelation, shows that the stories are not just about fear, but also about empathy. The ghostly hitchhiker becomes a symbol of unfinished journeys, yes, but also a symbol of the human heart's readiness to care, even when faced with the unknown. And then there are those who claim the encounters are more than stories. Paranormal investigators have documented cases where drivers who picked up a vanishing hitchhiker later discovered details they could not have known otherwise: names, addresses, even memories of long-dead individuals. Whether or not you believe these accounts, they give weight to the idea that the road itself remembers. That in the fabric of asphalt and steel, in the hum of tires against the earth, there is a memory of every life touched by its journey. Imagine for a moment, driving alone down a silent highway. The world outside your windshield is reduced to shadows, your headlights pushing back the night just a few yards ahead. The hum of your engine is steady, almost lulling. Then you see her a figure waiting at the side of the road. You slow down, your heart beating faster, the question rising in your mind: is she real? Or is she one of the countless souls who still walk the highways, replaying the final chapters of their stories? For those who have lived these encounters, the answer doesn't matter. What matters is the moment itself, the way the ordinary journey transformed into something mysterious, how the memory lingered long after the passenger had vanished. Ghostly hitchhikers remind us that the road is not just a place of movement, but also a place of memory. Each stretch of highway is haunted, not just by accidents and tragedies, but by the echoes of countless lives that once traveled it. So the next time you find yourself driving down an empty road at night, glance at the shoulder. Look at the glow of your headlights as they stretch into the distance. And if you see a figure waiting there, asking silently for a ride, you might wonder, are you about to share your journey with the living, or with one of the many who still travel the roads of the dead? Phantom hitchhikers are not just bound to the highways of America. The story of the mysterious passenger appears across cultures, continents, and centuries, as if every road in the world has its own ghost waiting by the roadside. It is one of the most universal ghost stories we know, told in countless variations, each shaped by the land and the people who live upon it. Wherever there is a lonely road and a traveler with an open seat, there seems to be a tale of someone stepping out of the shadows and into a vehicle, only to vanish before the journey ends. In England, for example, there is the story of the Bluebell Hill Bride. This haunting tale takes place on a stretch of road near Maidstone in Kent. where drivers have reported encounters with a young woman dressed in white. The legend dates back to the 1960s, when a bride-to-be was killed in a tragic car accident on her way to her wedding. Ever since, countless motorists have described nearly running her over, only for her figure to vanish upon impact, or watching as she suddenly appears inside their vehicle before disappearing just as quickly. Some say she is forever trying to reach her wedding day, others that she relives the moment of her death each time headlights sweep across the road. The Bluebell Hill Bride is so famous that she has become a symbol of English ghost folklore, reminding drivers that even in the heart of modern Britain, old roads carry stories that cannot be erased. Crossing into Scotland, the tale takes on a different form. On the A75, a road locals sometimes call the most haunted in the country, drivers speak of sudden, terrifying visions. They describe men and women stepping into the path of their vehicles, sometimes carrying bundles, sometimes screaming, always vanishing just before impact. The road has become notorious among truck drivers in particular, who whisper about a phantom family that appears at night, forcing drivers to slam on their brakes in panic. When the road clears, there is no one there. The A75's reputation as a haunted highway continues to grow, and those who travel it late at night often report a sense of dread, as if unseen eyes are watching from the hedgerows. Ireland, too, has its own version of the vanishing passenger. One famous tale tells of a man who picked up a young girl late at night, giving her a ride home from a dance. She gave him directions to her house, but when they arrived, she had vanished from the seat beside him. Confused, the man knocked on the door, only to be told by the woman who answered that her daughter had died tragically years earlier. This story, repeated in towns across Ireland, carries the same familiar rhythm we have seen before, but it is infused with the melancholy of Irish folklore, where the line between the living and the dead is often thin, and where spirits are believed to walk freely in the places they once loved. Moving further across the world, we find that phantom hitchhiker stories exist even in countries with very different traditions. In Mexico, the tale of La Llorona often merges with roadside legends. Drivers at night sometimes claim to see a woman in white, her face streaked with tears, wandering along rivers and highways. She asks for help, sometimes even for a ride, before vanishing with a wail that chills the blood. La Llorona's story is older than cars, rooted in folklore centuries deep. Yet in the modern world, she has found new ways to appear, sometimes stepping into the role of the phantom hitchhiker, weaving ancient grief into the rhythm of modern roads. In Japan, tales of ghostly passengers are also well known, particularly in the years after great tragedies. After the devastating tsunami of 2011, taxi drivers in the hardest-hit areas reported picking up passengers who would give an address, ride in silence, and then disappear before reaching their destination. Many of these drivers later insisted they were not hallucinating, that the weight of the passengers could be felt in the car. Some even recorded fares from these rides, leaving behind proof of encounters that blurred the line between mourning and haunting. In Japanese culture, the idea of eerie, or restless spirits, fits naturally into these accounts. The dead, especially those who die suddenly or tragically, are believed to linger, searching for closure. What better place to encounter them than on a road leading home, a path they may never have finished walking in life? The universality of these stories suggests something powerful. The phantom hitchhiker is not simply a tale of one culture or one moment in time. It is a story that reflects the fears and hopes of travelers everywhere. It speaks to the unease of the road, the vulnerability of offering a ride to a stranger, and the lingering presence of those who left this world too suddenly. Whether it is a bride on an English road, a family on a Scottish highway, or a grieving spirit in Japan, the pattern repeats, reminding us that wherever we travel, the dead may be waiting just ahead, their stories still unfinished. In the Philippines, the phantom hitchhiker legend takes a chillingly vivid form through the story of the White Lady of Balete Drive. This long stretch of road in Quezon City has been the subject of countless ghost sightings, and nearly all of them involve the same figure, a pale woman in a flowing white dress, her long black hair hiding much of her face. Drivers describe her appearing suddenly in the rearview mirror, often seated silently in the back seat. Her presence discovered only when it is too late to react. Others report seeing her by the side of the road, waiting for a ride, and then vanishing after stepping inside the vehicle. The White Lady has become so notorious that she is considered a cultural icon of Filipino ghost lore. Her story passed down not just as a tale of terror, but as a reminder of how the road itself can hold onto grief and tragedy. Her story is far from isolated. Across Southeast Asia, ghostly women in white appear frequently on roads, often connected with sorrowful deaths or accidents. In Malaysia and Singapore, the figure of the Pontianak is well known, a restless spirit of a woman who died during childbirth, now haunting lonely places. While she is more often tied to forests and dark corners, there are accounts of drivers meeting her on rural roads, where she appears as a beautiful woman asking for help. Once inside the car, her beauty distorts into something terrifying, her laughter filling the vehicle before she disappears into the night. These stories carry a strong warning that not every plea for help on the roadside comes from the living. South Africa offers another fascinating variation with the Uniondale hitchhiker. On the quiet roads near the town of Uniondale, drivers have told the same story for decades. It begins with a young woman who died in a car accident on Easter Sunday in the 1960s. Since then, motorists report picking up a hitchhiker who matches her description. A quiet, polite woman who sits in the back seat until, without warning, she vanishes. Some drivers describe hearing the door slam as if she physically left, while others claim she disappears without a sound. What makes this legend particularly powerful is the sense of repetition, the spirit returning on the same holiday, year after year, as if bound to the moment her life ended. Even Australia has its own phantom passengers. One tale tells of a ghostly hitchhiker seen along the Great Alpine Road, where a man in ragged clothing is said to appear by the roadside. Those who stop to help often report that he gets into the car only to vanish a few miles later. In some accounts, the driver smells smoke lingering in the car afterward, leading many to believe he was a victim of one of the bushfires that have scarred the region. His presence serves as both a chilling reminder of tragedy and a quiet plea not to be forgotten. What stands out as we move across continents is how similar the core of the story remains, even though the details shift with the culture. Whether it is the elegant bride of England, the sorrowful white lady of the Philippines, or the lonely wanderer of Australia, the phantom hitchhiker always seems to embody unfinished business. These spirits are tied to the roads not because of where they lived, but because of where their stories ended. Highways, with their constant movement and endless horizons, become places where time folds, allowing the past to step into the present for just a moment. Japan, the Philippines, South Africa, Australia. The variety of these stories also suggests something deeper about human imagination. We all understand the vulnerability of the road, the feeling of isolation while traveling, the nervous glance in the rearview mirror when the night feels too quiet. Ghostly hitchhiker tales channel that vulnerability, shaping it into stories that both warn and unsettle. And perhaps they also remind us of the shared human fear of being left behind, stranded between places with no one to help carry us home. Latin America holds some of the most haunting variations of the phantom hitchhiker, blending ancient folklore with the realities of modern roads. In Venezuela, there is the legend of La Sayona. Unlike the sorrowful brides or lost travelers we've seen elsewhere, La Sayona is often described as a vengeful spirit, appearing as a beautiful woman who lures unfaithful men. Drivers speak of stopping for her on lonely highways, entranced by her beauty, only for her appearance to shift into something monstrous once she has their attention. In some accounts, she disappears with a scream that echoes through the night, while in others, she leaves behind scratches or the stench of decay. Her legend reflects not just the fear of the road, but also moral warnings woven into the culture to remind people of loyalty and consequence. Mexico, too, has countless roadside spirits beyond the famous La Llorona. In rural towns, drivers whisper about women who ask for a ride only to vanish near cemeteries, or spectral men who wander highways, forever searching for loved ones. One eerie detail often repeats: the ghost passenger will sometimes leave behind a damp seat, as though their presence was physically real. These details make the stories hard to dismiss, and they add a layer of uncanny realism that keeps them alive through generations. In India, phantom hitchhikers are told with a distinctly unsettling twist. Many drivers, especially truckers who travel the long rural highways, share tales of picking up passengers late at night, only to realize the person's feet are turned backward. In Indian folklore, backward feet are a sign of a spirit, often a churl, a ghost of a woman who died tragically or unfairly. Some truckers claim that once they notice the feet, the passenger vanishes instantly, leaving behind a terrifying silence. Others say the churl asks for water, and when refused, curses the driver's journey. These roadside stories are so common that many Indian drivers avoid traveling alone at night, fearing not just accidents, but encounters with the restless dead. China and Taiwan also share their own unique versions. One well-known urban legend tells of a driver picking up a young woman who asks to be taken home. When she exits the car, the driver notices she left behind a jacket. Wanting to return it, he visits the house the next day, only to be told by grieving relatives that their daughter died in an accident years earlier. When shown the jacket, the family recognizes it immediately as something she once owned. These tales capture the eerie blend of the ordinary and the supernatural, where a simple ride turns into an encounter with grief carried across decades. In Thailand, spirits known as Phi are often tied to tragic deaths, and the roads are believed to be especially active with them. Taxi drivers in Bangkok frequently share tales of passengers who vanish mid-ride, often leaving the car doors open. Some drivers even admit they refuse to pick up lone women at night, not out of cruelty, but out of fear they might not be human. One story tells of a driver who gave a ride to a quiet young woman late one night, only to realize at the end of the journey that she had no reflection in the car's rearview mirror. He sped away in panic, never taking fares in that part of the city again. Africa also offers chilling accounts beyond the Uniondale hitchhiker. In Ghana, there are tales of spirits appearing as ordinary travelers along rural roads, sometimes asking for help or food before vanishing. Local belief often ties these ghosts to ancestors or wandering souls who died away from home. Unlike some of the vengeful spirits elsewhere, these figures are often viewed with a kind of sorrow, as if they are reminders of the importance of guiding the dead safely back to their families. What becomes clear as we travel through these legends is that phantom hitchhikers are not bound by culture, language, or geography. Whether in the misty lanes of England, the deserts of Mexico, the rice fields of Asia, or the mountains of Africa, the same pattern repeats. A traveler appears, a kindness is offered, and then the impossible happens. The passenger vanishes, leaving behind silence, mystery, and a story that will echo for years to come. At their core, these stories reveal something deeply human. They reflect our fear of the unknown, our vulnerability on the road, and our longing to understand what lies beyond death. But they also reflect compassion, the willingness to stop for a stranger in need, even at great risk. The Phantom Hitchhiker is both a warning and a mirror, reminding us that the line between life and death is thinner than we imagine, and that every road carries memories that cannot be erased. As the night deepens, we continue our journey across the globe, listening for echoes of footsteps that never finish their path and voices that vanish into the dark. These Phantom Hitchhiker tales may seem like isolated curiosities, but the sheer variety of their appearances shows how universal this experience is. Wherever people travel, wherever long roads cut through lonely landscapes, the same spectral stories appear. They serve as shared folklore, threads weaving humanity's relationship with mystery and the unknown into one vast tapestry. One of the most chilling variations comes from Mexico, where the legend of La Llorona merges with the Phantom Hitchhiker motif. In certain versions, drivers passing near rivers or lakes at night report picking up a woman in white who weeps softly in the back seat. Sometimes she speaks about her lost children. Sometimes she simply cries, her voice heavy with despair. When the driver reaches a crossroads or a bridge, she fades into nothing. The symbolism here runs deep. La Llorona's sorrow is eternal, and by appearing as a hitchhiker, she continues her endless wandering, asking the living to unknowingly take part in her grief. In South Africa, the N2 highway between Cape Town and Somerset West is said to host a phantom woman who steps into traffic, only to vanish upon impact. Many drivers believe they struck someone, pulling over in panic, only to find nothing there. Other stories describe a young man in old-fashioned clothing who hails down cars near the road and asks for a ride to the nearest town, disappearing before reaching his destination. These tales reveal another aspect of phantom hitchhikers. They sometimes appear not as passengers, but as sudden apparitions, demanding drivers confront the thin veil between the living and the dead. Australia, too, has its share of such encounters. On the Stewart Highway, a vast and lonely stretch that cuts through the outback, travelers tell of the Hairy Man, a shadowy hitchhiker with an eerie human-like shape, who appears suddenly by the roadside and sometimes in the rearview mirror of cars. Some link this figure to Aboriginal myths of trickster spirits or ancestral beings who test the courage of those who pass through their land. Others see it as just another lonely ghost, bound to the road by an event no one remembers, but everyone feels. Moving to Ireland, the land of misty hills and age-old legends, the Phantom Hitchhiker takes on a more ancient and chilling tone. Along country lanes, some drivers say they've encountered a young girl dressed in a burial shroud, asking for a ride to her home. When the driver arrives at the location, often a centuries-old graveyard, she fades away. Such stories feel deeply tied to Celtic beliefs about the spirit world, where the dead do not vanish but remain close, slipping in and out of human sight, particularly at thresholds, crossroads, bridges, and lonely roads. In Japan, where ghost stories are as carefully woven into culture as poetry, phantom hitchhiker tales often carry a lingering sadness. One famous version tells of a young woman in a white dress seen on highways outside Tokyo. Drivers pick her up, and she quietly directs them to her house. When they arrive, the family greets the driver with grief. They explain their daughter died years before in an accident on that same stretch of road. Such stories echo the Japanese concept of yurei spirits bound to the world by powerful emotions like sorrow or longing. In these accounts, the act of being given a ride is symbolic, as though the living briefly carry the burden of the dead's unresolved journey. Even in countries with fewer highways, the phantom hitchhiker makes an appearance. In the Philippines, jeepney drivers tell of passengers who board late at night, sit silently, and then disappear without paying the fare. Often these figures are described as pale or shadowy, with no reflection in the vehicle's mirrors. In rural villages, people say these passengers are restless souls, forever searching for home but never able to reach it. It is striking to see how many cultures connect these encounters with morality, memory, or loss. In America, they often warn of dangerous stretches of road or remind drivers of past tragedies. In Latin America, they blend with legends of mourning women and wandering spirits. In Europe, they tie into centuries-old traditions of travelers meeting beings from beyond. In Asia, they resonate with ancestral beliefs about spirits lingering in places of sudden death. When seen together, these stories suggest something more profound than coincidence. Perhaps they are cultural expressions of the same human fear, the fear of traveling alone into the unknown. Roads at night feel liminal, a place between destinations, much like life itself is a journey between birth and death. The phantom hitchhiker steps into that space, reminding us that the boundary between the living and the departed may be thinner than we imagine. As our path through this segment closes, one truth lingers. No matter the country, no matter the language, someone somewhere has seen a figure by the road, waiting, always waiting. Whether they vanish in silence, ride along with sorrow, or leave behind a warning, they are part of a global echo, an unbroken chain of stories binding humanity to its ghosts. And though the details shift, the feeling remains the same, an uncanny chill, a question of whether the stranger you passed was truly alive, and the sense that maybe the dead still travel alongside us, unseen yet never absent. Stories of phantom hitchhikers are more than just eerie encounters on lonely roads. Beneath the surface of every tale lies a deeper layer of meaning, a reflection of human fears, desires, and beliefs that stretch back far longer than the invention of the automobile. Ghost stories are rarely only about ghosts. They are about us, the living, trying to make sense of the world we move through and the mysteries that surround us. When we peel back the details of each account, the vanished passenger, the haunted stretch of highway, the soft voice asking for a ride, we begin to see that these stories are woven with symbols that speak to universal themes. At the heart of the phantom hitchhiker legend is the road itself. Roads have always symbolized journeys, both physical and spiritual. In myth, folklore, and religion, the road often represents the path of life, the movement from one stage to another, or even the journey from the living world into death. To meet a ghost on the road, then, is not just to encounter a lost spirit. It is to come face to face with the reminder that every journey has an end. And that end is something we cannot escape. Highways at night, with their endless black stretches and uncertain destinations, become a perfect canvas for these reflections. The phantom hitchhiker becomes a living metaphor, a reminder that death is a traveler too, always present, always waiting at the edge of the path. Another powerful symbol within these stories is the figure of the hitchhiker themselves. They often appear as young women, vulnerable and tragic, dressed in white or in outdated clothing that hints at another time. In literature and folklore, White has long been associated with purity, mourning, and the spectral world. A woman in white is not just a character, it is an image of innocence lost, of sorrow unending, and of life cut short. When drivers stop to offer her a ride, they are unknowingly taking part in a ritual of compassion, but also stepping into a confrontation with grief itself. Their journey with her becomes a symbolic act, a way of carrying the weight of another story, if only for a short time. There are also male hitchhiker ghosts, though they often appear with different symbolic weight. Sometimes they are soldiers, dressed in uniforms from wars long past, embodying the restless memory of conflict and sacrifice. Other times they appear as ordinary men, perhaps representing lives interrupted by sudden accidents or acts of violence. These figures may symbolize the collective memory of tragedy, the way communities continue to carry the imprint of lives lost too soon. By appearing on the road, they serve as reminders that the past has not vanished, but travels alongside us. The act of offering a ride is itself symbolic. To stop for a stranger is to show trust, compassion, or sometimes fearlessness. When that stranger turns out to be a ghost, the driver's action becomes a symbolic crossing of boundaries. They have not just helped another human being, they have briefly aided someone from beyond the grave. In this sense, phantom hitchhiker stories reflect a deep human longing to connect, even with those who are no longer alive. They speak to the desire for empathy that extends beyond the limits of mortality. The sudden disappearance of the hitchhiker is one of the most telling symbols of all. Often they vanish at a specific place, a cemetery, a house, or a crossroads. Each of these locations is steeped in symbolism. The cemetery is the obvious home of the dead, where the spirit returns to rest. The house may represent unfinished business, or the longing for home that the ghost cannot release. The crossroads is particularly significant, as it has long been viewed as a liminal place, a meeting point between worlds. In countless traditions, crossroads are where deals are made with spirits, where travelers are tested, and where paths to the unknown open wide. For a ghost to vanish at such a place is to remind us that life and death are not divided by solid walls, but by thin lines we often pass without noticing. In many versions of the tale, the phantom hitchhiker leaves behind something, a name, a warning, or a chilling sense of the past. This act has symbolic weight as well. It shows that encounters with the dead are never meaningless. They leave traces, impressions, that ripple through the lives of the living. These remnants suggest that our interactions with the past, even the forgotten or the tragic, shape us in ways we may not fully understand. The ghost's presence becomes a symbol of memory itself, a reminder that what has come before always lingers, just out of sight. The meaning of the phantom hitchhiker also lies in its repetition. It is not just one story told in one place, but the same story told again and again across cultures and centuries. This universality is itself symbolic, pointing to shared human concerns. It reflects the way we all grapple with mortality, with loss, and with the unknown that waits at the edges of our travels. Whether the tale is set in America, Mexico, Ireland, or Japan, the phantom hitchhiker becomes a mirror, showing us that the mysteries of death are not bound to one people or one time, but belong to us all. To explore the symbolism further, we can look at how phantom hitchhiker tales echo ancient patterns of myth. Many cultures tell stories of travelers who meet supernatural beings along their journey. Sometimes these encounters are warnings, other times they are tests of character. In Greek mythology, Hecate, the goddess of crossroads and liminal spaces, was said to appear at night to travelers. In Celtic folklore, will-o'-the-wisps guided wanderers into swamps and bogs, leading them astray. In these traditions, the road was never just a road. It was a place where the ordinary met the extraordinary. The Phantom Hitchhiker continues this lineage, carrying forward the idea that journeys expose us to forces beyond human understanding. The symbolism of the Phantom Hitchhiker also speaks to themes of morality. Many of the classic stories end with a revelation that the driver has encountered a spirit who died tragically, often due to reckless driving, drunk driving, or some other preventable accident. These tales function as moral parables, much like medieval ghost stories once did. The vanishing passenger becomes a symbol of consequence, a ghostly embodiment of mistakes that should not be repeated. In this sense, the Phantom Hitchhiker isn't simply a spooky tale. It is a warning, a reminder to drive carefully, to respect the dangers of the road, and to consider the fragility of life. On a psychological level, the Phantom Hitchhiker may symbolize loneliness and the human need for connection. Highways at night can be isolating places, stretching endlessly with only the hum of tires for company. The sudden appearance of another figure, a fellow traveler, someone to share the road with, represents the comfort of companionship. When that figure vanishes, it highlights the deep solitude at the heart of human existence. The ghost reminds us that even in moments of togetherness, we are often alone on our ultimate journey. The repeated gendering of the Phantom Hitchhiker as a young woman also carries symbolic meaning. Folklorists have noted that these tales often emphasize themes of vulnerability, innocence, and tragic endings. They resonate with long-standing archetypes of the maiden in distress or the woman wronged, common figures in ghost lore. Her presence may symbolize society's ongoing confrontation with themes of gender, safety, and the loss of innocence. To encounter her is to be reminded of fragility, of youth cut short, of a story that ended before it was meant to. Drivers who offer her a ride enact a symbolic gesture of protection, though it always comes too late. For communities, the Phantom Hitchhiker can serve as a symbolic anchor for memory. Highways where accidents occurred often develop reputations for being haunted. The ghost story becomes a way of embedding tragedy into the landscape, ensuring that it is not forgotten. These roadside spirits are symbolic caretakers of memory, tying human loss to a physical place so that future generations will not pass without remembering what happened there. In this way, ghost stories perform the function of oral history, carrying forward collective memory through haunting. There is also the symbolism of thresholds. Every Phantom Hitchhiker story involves crossing boundaries between night and day, life and death, solitude and companionship. Ghosts are creatures of the in-between, and roads at night are themselves liminal places, neither here nor there, always leading elsewhere. To pick up a hitchhiker who vanishes before the destination is reached is to be reminded that some journeys can never be completed. It is a symbolic lesson about impermanence, about how all travelers must one day step out of the vehicle and disappear into another place. Phantom Hitchhiker stories also reflect humanity's unease with technology and progress. Cars are relatively recent inventions in the grand sweep of human history, and yet these ancient archetypes of restless spirits immediately found their way into the new mode of travel. It is as though the human imagination insisted that ghosts must keep pace with us, adapting their appearances to match our modern lives. In this sense, the Phantom Hitchhiker becomes a symbolic bridge between the ancient and the modern, reminding us that no matter how fast we drive or how far we travel, the mysteries of death remain alongside us, adjusting their form but never fading. In some ways, the phantom hitchhiker is also a symbol of unresolved stories. These figures often appear as if they are trying to complete something they never could in life: one last ride home, one last crossing, one last conversation. Their vanishing leaves the living unsettled, but it also reinforces the idea that not all endings are neat. Some lives end abruptly, leaving gaps and silences that folklore fills with ghostly presences. The phantom hitchhiker is not just a spooky figure, but a symbol of incompleteness, of how not every journey finds its destination. As we continue peeling back the layers of the phantom hitchhiker legend, another symbolic dimension becomes clear: the role of repetition. These stories are rarely told in isolation. Instead, they echo across towns, states, and even continents, with slight variations in detail but remarkable consistency in theme. This repetition is symbolic in itself. It suggests that humanity has a need to retell the same story in different guises, as though we are rehearsing our confrontation with mortality over and over. Each telling becomes a ritual, a way for communities to process fear, loss, and the ever-present reality of death. By repeating the story, we keep death in our imagination, not as something to deny, but as something to acknowledge, even to weave into our journeys. The universality of the tale also symbolizes the way that human experiences transcend culture. A farmer in rural Ireland and a truck driver in Texas may have little in common, yet both can understand the chill of offering a ride to someone who disappears before reaching home. The phantom hitchhiker symbolizes our shared vulnerability. It is a reminder that no matter how different our landscapes or languages may be, we all travel roads that lead eventually to silence. This collective recognition turns the ghostly passenger into a universal figure, a symbol of the human condition itself. Another symbolic element worth exploring is the sudden vanishing act that defines these encounters. Disappearance in folklore is often a metaphor for the fleeting nature of existence. Just as a hitchhiker vanishes mid-journey, so too can life vanish mid-story. The ghost symbolizes the abruptness with which everything we know can change. For the driver, the moment of realization that the seat is empty, that the figure is gone, mirrors the human experience of loss. Loved ones, too, can vanish suddenly, leaving behind absence in the place where presence once sat. In this way, the phantom hitchhiker is a haunting symbol of grief, an allegory for how fragile and uncertain life truly is. Crossroads, bridges, and cemeteries, where many of these spirits vanish, carry a heavy symbolic load as well. Crossroads represent decisions and the unknown, places where one must choose a path without knowing where it leads. Bridges symbolize transitions, moments of crossing from one state to another, just as the soul is believed to cross from the living to the dead. Cemeteries, of course, embody finality, the inevitable destination of every journey. That ghosts vanish at these sites shows how phantom hitchhiker stories symbolize not only the literal places of transition, but the metaphorical ones as well. They remind listeners that life itself is filled with thresholds, each demanding a passage into something new, often accompanied by loss. The phantom hitchhiker can also symbolize guilt. Some interpretations suggest that drivers who claim these encounters may be processing their own subconscious fears or regrets, particularly if they have experienced loss on the road. Picking up a phantom passenger may symbolize the driver's own desire for redemption, a chance to help someone even if they could not help before. When the ghost disappears, the act becomes symbolic closure, though never complete. The legend becomes a ritualized way of processing guilt and longing, giving shape to emotions that cannot be easily spoken. Equally symbolic is the recurring image of the passenger dressed in outdated clothing. Often the ghost wears garments from decades earlier, linking them unmistakably to the past. This detail symbolizes the persistence of history in the present, the way tragedies do not vanish but remain, stitched into the fabric of everyday life. When a driver sees someone dressed as though from another era, they are seeing not just a person, but the embodiment of memory. The phantom hitchhiker thus symbolizes the past itself, reaching forward to remind the living that time does not erase all wounds. The cultural variations of the story also carry symbolic meaning. In Mexico, the crying woman who enters cars is deeply tied to the cultural symbol of La Llorona, embodying grief and maternal loss. In Japan, the spirit in white echoes the symbolism of eerie, bound to earth by unresolved emotion. In America, where highways represent freedom and progress, the phantom hitchhiker symbolizes the shadow side of that freedom: danger, death, and impermanence. Each culture adapts the core symbol to reflect its own values and anxieties, proving that these stories are less about literal ghosts and more about the symbols they carry. One of the most haunting symbols within these tales is silence. Many phantom hitchhikers say little or nothing during the ride. Their quiet presence, their watchful eyes, symbolize the silence of the grave. They are passengers of absence, reminders that not everything has an explanation, and not every story is told aloud. The driver's awareness of their presence, followed by their vanishing, becomes symbolic of humanity's relationship with mystery. We sense it. We live beside it. But when we look too closely, it disappears into the shadows. Perhaps the deepest symbolic thread of all is the way these stories blur boundaries. Life and death, past and present. The real and the unreal, they all meet in the simple act of giving a stranger a ride. The phantom hitchhiker is a liminal figure, existing between categories. As such, they symbolize the uncertainties of existence itself. They remind us that categories we often treat as absolute may be thinner than we believe. Just as a passenger can be both present and absent, so too can life be both fragile and enduring, both known and unknown. The symbolism of the phantom hitchhiker, then, is vast and layered. It is not just a ghost story, but a symbolic exploration of mortality, memory, morality, and mystery. To meet a phantom hitchhiker is to step into a symbolic drama where every element, the road, the clothing, the silence, the vanishing, is rich with meaning. These stories endure not only because they chill us, but because they speak to something deeply true about the human condition. As we reach the final stretch of this exploration, it becomes clear that phantom hitchhiker stories are more than folklore whispered on long roads. They are symbolic narratives, carefully shaped by time, culture, and human need. Their enduring power lies not only in the shiver they bring, but in the way they reflect back to us what we fear, what we long for, and what we struggle to understand. To complete our journey through their symbolism, we must look closely at the ways they connect to some of the most profound themes of human existence. One such theme is impermanence. The phantom hitchhiker's sudden vanishing is a symbol that life itself is fleeting. Just as the passenger disappears mid-journey, so too can moments of joy, companionship, or even life itself vanish without warning. These stories allow us to rehearse that truth in a controlled way. We hear the story and we imagine the encounter. We feel the chill, and then we return to our lives. But in the back of our minds lingers the reminder that everything we hold can be taken in an instant. The legend also symbolizes our relationship with memory and grief. Ghosts, after all, are embodiments of memory that refuses to fade. A phantom hitchhiker who returns to the site of their death symbolizes grief tied to a place. Communities keep telling these stories not because they believe every detail, but because they need to keep remembering the lives that were lost. In this way, phantom hitchhikers are more than ghosts. They are symbols of remembrance, reminders that the past never truly disappears. Every time a driver retells their strange encounter, they are unknowingly participating in an act of memorial, carrying forward the weight of someone else's unfinished story. On another level, these legends symbolize our ongoing search for meaning in the face of randomness. Car accidents, sudden deaths, and tragedies often feel senseless. They happen without reason, leaving behind a void of understanding. By wrapping these events in the cloak of a ghost story, communities create symbolic meaning. The phantom hitchhiker is not just a victim of chance, but a guide, a messenger, or a presence that makes us stop and reflects. In this sense, the story transforms chaos into narrative, turning random tragedy into a symbolic reminder about life, death, and caution. The very act of driving through the night carries symbolic weight as well. The car becomes a vessel, a moving capsule in the darkness, carrying the living into uncertain territory. When a ghost joins the ride, the car itself becomes a symbolic threshold, a place where life and death briefly share space. This symbolism resonates deeply because cars are modern, ordinary, and everyday. By introducing a ghost into such a common setting, the legend reminds us that the extraordinary can intrude upon the ordinary at any moment. Death does not only dwell in graveyards or ancient ruins, it can sit quietly beside us on the way home. There is also an underlying symbolic tension in the role of the driver. The driver represents control, someone steering a path through the unknown. The hitchhiker, on the other hand, represents vulnerability, someone dependent on the kindness of others. But when the hitchhiker turns out to be a ghost, the power balance shifts. The driver's sense of control is shattered, replaced by helplessness in the face of forces beyond comprehension. Symbolically, this reveals the fragility of human control itself. No matter how steady our hands are on the wheel, there are mysteries we cannot master. In a broader sense, phantom hitchhiker stories symbolize humanity's eternal relationship with thresholds and transitions. Roads lead us from one place to another, and ghosts remind us that one day, all of us will make a final transition. The phantom hitchhiker is not only a chilling passenger, but a mirror, reflecting our own journey toward the unknown. Their presence on the road is a reminder that death is not far behind, not something hidden away, but something that travels with us quietly, patiently, waiting at the edge of the next turn. Perhaps the most haunting symbolism of all lies in the question these tales leave us with. When a driver realizes their passenger has vanished, they are left with uncertainty. Did it happen? Was it real? Or was it a trick of the mind? This uncertainty itself is symbolic of the mystery of existence. Just as we cannot fully explain the phantom hitchhiker, we cannot fully explain life or death. We are left with questions, and perhaps that is the point. The story does not give answers, it mirrors our own uncertainty about what lies beyond the road of life. In the end, the symbolism of the phantom hitchhiker legend is layered, multifaceted, and deeply resonant. It is a tale that speaks to impermanence, memory, grief, morality, companionship, guilt, and the fragility of control. It connects modern anxieties with ancient archetypes, bridging the gap between folklore and the present day. Its power lies not in whether it is true, but in the truths it reveals about us. So when we hear of a lone figure by the roadside, arm outstretched for a ride, we should remember that the story is not just about a ghost. It is about the symbols carried in that moment, the road as life, the car as vessel, the passenger as memory, and the disappearance as death. The phantom hitchhiker legend endures because it speaks to something universal, something every listener understands deep within, that we are all travelers, and one day, we too will take a journey from which there is no return. The story of the phantom hitchhiker may feel like an old tale told around campfires, yet it is far from fading into the past. In fact, modern drivers still report seeing them. These sightings continue to take place along highways, rural backroads, and even city streets, often leaving witnesses shaken for years. What makes these stories so unnerving is that they happen to ordinary people in ordinary settings. One moment you are alone in your car with nothing but the hum of the road, and the next you are sharing the space with something that should not be there at all. Take, for instance, the account from a man driving late one night along a desolate stretch of road outside of Chicago, a city that has long been tied to the most famous phantom hitchhiker of them all, Resurrection Mary. He described slowing his car when he saw a young woman standing on the shoulder, her pale dress lit faintly by his headlights. She looked lost and cold, and so he pulled over, offering her a ride. She said little, only murmuring a destination. But before he could even reach the spot, she vanished from the seat beside him. All that remained was the faint smell of roses in the air, a detail echoed in countless other encounters. Modern reports like this do not only come from the United States. Across the globe, drivers still tell eerily similar stories. In England, for example, there are fresh accounts of figures thumbing for rides along the A38 or the A616, only to disappear before reaching their supposed stop. One lorry driver swore that a young man in torn clothes appeared in his cab, looking dazed as though he had just stumbled from a wreck. When the driver turned to ask if he needed help, the seat was empty. Later, shaken but curious, he discovered that stretch of road had claimed many lives in recent crashes. Technology has also changed how these stories spread. In the past, only a handful of people might ever hear a ghostly driver's account. Today, the internet gives these tales a much wider audience. Social media platforms are full of personal experiences, often told in breathless detail. Videos appear on forums where dashcam footage shows what looks like a figure stepping out into the headlights before vanishing without a trace. While skeptics are quick to point to camera glitches or tricks of the light, those who have lived through the encounter insist that no explanation fits what they saw with their own eyes. A particularly unsettling modern account comes from the highways of South Africa. A taxi driver picked up a man who seemed perfectly normal at first. The passenger gave him an address and settled in quietly. But when the driver reached the destination and turned to tell his rider they had arrived, the back seat was empty. The door had never opened, no sound had been made, yet the man was gone. The driver later learned the address belonged to a cemetery, and the grave of a man who had died in a car crash only months before was located there. Stories like this reinforce the idea that phantom hitchhikers are not just fragments of folklore, but persistent echoes of tragedy. Witnesses often describe an uncanny silence that fills the car during these encounters. Even when the hitchhiker speaks, their voice can seem oddly faint, as though coming from a distance. Others remember the weight of the passenger pressing against the seat, the slight rustle of clothing, even the smell of perfume, smoke, or damp earth. These sensory details make it all the harder to dismiss the encounters as imagination. For those who experience them, the memory is not like a fleeting dream. It is anchored in reality, as vivid as any other moment of their lives. Skeptics argue that fatigue, stress, or the isolation of nighttime driving can play tricks on the mind, creating vivid hallucinations. They point out that drivers are often tired. their minds wandering, and shadows can easily take human shapes. Yet even among skeptics, there is acknowledgement that so many people across different countries and cultures cannot all be imagining the same thing in such precise detail. It raises the question, are phantom hitchhiker sightings a trick of psychology? Or are we brushing against something truly otherworldly? Some of the most unsettling accounts of phantom hitchhikers come from emergency responders, long-haul drivers, and people whose work keeps them on the road at unusual hours. These witnesses are not looking for the supernatural. They are simply going about their jobs when the inexplicable crosses their path. Because of their credibility and experience, their stories carry an extra weight. One such case involved a police officer in Arizona who pulled over to check on what looked like a stranded motorist walking along the side of a desert highway. The figure was described as a woman in outdated clothing with long, dark hair. As the officer slowed and stepped out of his car, the figure suddenly vanished right in front of him. Shaken, he searched the roadside, convinced it must have been a trick of the shadows, but there was no sign of anyone. Later, when recounting the incident to other officers, he learned that similar sightings had been reported in that same stretch of desert for decades, always of the same woman. Taxi drivers around the world also tell chilling stories. In Japan, a wave of reports came after the 2011 tsunami when cab drivers in coastal towns described picking up passengers who disappeared mid-ride. Many of these supposed passengers had asked to be taken to areas that had been destroyed by the disaster. The drivers often only realized their ghostly nature when they reached the destination, turned around, and found their back seat empty. Some of these stories were even documented in interviews, creating a haunting connection between personal tragedy and the persistence of the human spirit. The phantom hitchhiker is not always a solitary traveler either. In some cases, drivers report picking up more than one figure. In the Philippines, there are tales of jeepney drivers who stop for groups of people standing at the roadside late at night. The passengers climb aboard, silent and heavy. But when the driver reaches the next village, the vehicle is completely empty. Those who tell these stories insist that the chilling cold left behind is proof that they carried more than shadows. Modern sightings often carry an eerie consistency. The hitchhiker rarely makes it all the way to their destination. Some vanish a few minutes after entering the car. Others disappear when the driver passes a certain landmark, often a bridge, cemetery, or accident site. In rare cases, the figure is seen standing once again by the roadside as if waiting for another ride. This repetition, like a loop caught in time, is one of the most unsettling elements of the legend. It suggests that what drivers are seeing is not a conscious spirit, but a recording of a tragic moment endlessly replayed. Technology, too, has begun to document encounters in ways that older generations could not. There are stories of Uber and rideshare drivers reporting strange passengers who seem to have no digital record of their trip. One driver swore he picked up a young woman in a quiet neighborhood and drove her several miles only to look back and realize she was gone. When he checked his app, there was no sign of a request ever having been placed, no record of payment, nothing to indicate he had taken the ride at all. For him, the chilling absence of digital evidence was even more disturbing than the disappearance itself. What makes these encounters feel so modern is not just the presence of cars or technology, but the fact that they keep adapting to our times. Centuries ago, people told stories of ghostly figures who appeared on horseback trails or at the edges of villages. Today, the spirit has simply updated its method of travel. Highways, cars, and GPS systems have become part of the new stage for old hauntings. The ghostly passenger has moved from the shadows of the forest to the glow of neon signs and the blur of headlights. Witnesses frequently describe an odd emotional atmosphere when these events occur. It is not always pure terror. Sometimes there is an overwhelming sadness, as though the hitchhiker carries with them the weight of their final moments. Others report a strange calm, as if the figure is resigned to their endless journey. But nearly all who tell these stories agree on one thing. Once you have shared your ride with a phantom passenger, you never forget it. One of the most well-known modern cases comes from the city of Chicago, where drivers still report sightings of Resurrection Mary. This ghostly hitchhiker has been associated with Resurrection Cemetery since the 1930s. Countless drivers over the decades have claimed to see her walking along Archer Avenue, a lonely road near the cemetery. She is usually described as a young woman in a light dress, sometimes dancing at a nearby ballroom before asking for a ride home. Inevitably, she vanishes when the car passes the gates of the cemetery, leaving drivers bewildered and shaken. What makes Mary's legend endure is not only the sheer number of reports, but the consistency in the details. Different drivers, separated by years and circumstances, describe the same pale figure, the same stretch of road, and the same chilling disappearance. Resurrection Mary is just one of many such tales across the United States. On Route 66, travelers tell stories of lone hitchhikers standing in the desert heat, only to disappear as cars approach. In Texas, there are tales of soldiers seen along back roads near old battle sites, asking for rides before fading away into the night. On the West Coast, ghostly women dressed in white are said to appear on cliffside highways, often linked to tragic accidents where drivers lost control on treacherous bends. Each region seems to have its own phantom, shaped by the history and tragedies of the land. What makes these accounts especially chilling is the credibility of the witnesses. Unlike campfire stories passed between friends, many of these encounters come from everyday people who had no reason to invent them. Truck drivers, police officers, students driving home late at night, even families on vacation, have all reported eerily similar experiences. They describe sudden cold, a fleeting glimpse of someone in the headlights, the impulse to stop and offer help, and then moments later, the realization that they are completely alone. Some modern encounters even leave behind physical traces. In North Carolina, a family claimed that after offering a ride to a young woman who disappeared from their back seat, they found damp marks on the upholstery as if she had been sitting there soaked from the rain. In another case, a driver reported that his passenger left behind a scarf only for it to vanish the next day when he tried to show it to friends. These details blur the line between imagination and reality, pulling the story out of the realm of folklore and into lived experience. The internet has also given new life to phantom hitchhiker stories. Online forums are filled with drivers sharing eerie encounters. Some post about picking up passengers who vanish, while others describe seeing figures waving frantically by the roadside, only to fade away when they get closer. Videos occasionally surface, captured by dash cams, showing shadowy shapes crossing highways or sitting briefly in the passenger seat before vanishing in a blink. Though skeptics dismiss many of these clips as tricks of light or clever editing, the sheer number of them shows just how alive the legend remains in the digital age. What fascinates many people is how the phantom hitchhiker adapts to each era. In older times, before cars, there were stories of ghostly travelers appearing on horseback trails, seeking a ride into town or a guide through the forest. With the invention of the automobile, the spirit found a new way to reach out. And now, with rideshare apps and digital tracking, the ghost has once again adapted, showing up in stories of passengers who leave no trace on electronic records. It is as if the legend refuses to die, transforming with each generation to remain relevant to the fears of the present day. Some researchers suggest that the modern stories reveal something deeper about human psychology. Highways, with their endless monotony and isolation, create a mental space where the line between the real and the imagined can blur. Drivers are alone, often late at night, with only the hum of the engine and the rhythm of passing road signs to keep them company. In that solitude, a shadow in the corner of the eye or the brief shape of a figure in the distance can take on an eerie significance. Yet, even if some encounters can be explained away as fatigue or illusion, others defy easy answers. Too many drivers describe the same details, too many stories repeat across time and place, to dismiss them all as tricks of the mind. This persistence is what makes phantom hitchhiker tales so enduring. Whether it is a woman in white vanishing at the gates of a cemetery, a soldier fading away before reaching his barracks, or a passenger who leaves no trace in a rideshare app, the story continues to haunt those who drive lonely roads. Each new sighting becomes another layer in a legend that refuses to fade, a reminder that perhaps the dead are not as far away as we imagine. Beyond the stories tied to famous roads and cemeteries, there are thousands of quieter accounts that rarely make headlines, but linger in the memories of those who experience them. A college student driving home for the holidays remembers a man in a tattered coat asking for a ride on a snowy evening. She stopped, let him into her car, and they exchanged small talk as she drove toward the next town. When she glanced to the passenger seat moments later, he was gone, and the door remained firmly shut. To this day, she wonders if she carried a ghost or if her tired mind created a companion for the long drive. In rural Canada, a truck driver reported seeing the same figure on 3 consecutive nights along the same stretch of icy road. On the first night, he swore the man was alive, stumbling along the shoulder. By the second, he realized the figure never responded to his horn. On the third night, when he stopped to shine his flashlight, the man simply dissolved into the blowing snow. The driver later learned that years earlier, a pedestrian had died in that very spot, struck by a passing vehicle on a stormy night. These kinds of accounts highlight an unsettling pattern. The phantom hitchhiker often reappears in places where tragedy has left its mark. Highways where fatal accidents occurred, bridges where people have taken their own lives, or long-forgotten roads tied to disasters, all become stages for these eerie apparitions. Some locals believe the spirits are bound to the place of their death, doomed to wander until someone helps them find peace. Others believe the repetition of their appearances marks the spot as cursed, a warning for travelers to be cautious. There are also stories of phantom hitchhikers who seem to act with intention. Not all simply vanish. In some cases they speak, sometimes delivering messages that chill the blood of those who hear them. A driver in Louisiana once claimed that his passenger whispered, "Turn back," just before he approached a dangerous curve. Moments later, a deer leapt into the road, and he narrowly avoided a deadly crash. By the time his heartbeat slowed and he looked to thank his mysterious savior, the passenger was gone. For the driver, the experience was not just eerie, but life-saving, leaving him to wonder if a restless soul had spared him from sharing its fate. Modern rideshare drivers also add their voices to this tapestry of ghostly encounters. Some speak of passengers who give vague directions, often leading them toward cemeteries, abandoned houses, or old industrial sites. By the time they arrive, the passenger vanishes, leaving the driver unnerved and unpaid. A handful of these stories circulate in online communities, where people swap ghostly encounters as casually as others discuss traffic or fuel prices. What stands out is how ordinary the beginnings of these stories are. A driver picks up a rider, a simple act of routine, yet within minutes, that routine fractures into something that defies reason. Technology occasionally captures fragments of these moments. Dash cams flicker, as a passenger seems to appear, only for the recording to glitch at the exact moment the figure vanishes. Phone GPS logs show brief detours to isolated places, even when drivers swear they never left the main road. In one case, a rideshare driver claimed his phone showed he had completed a trip, complete with timestamps, but the ride did not appear in the company's system. It was as if the ghost had left behind just enough evidence to prove it had been there, while still existing outside the normal order of things. Skeptics argue that all of this is nothing more than misperception, fatigue, or the tricks of suggestion. Long drives at night, they say, create perfect conditions for the mind to play games. But if that were true, why do the same details surface in so many different cultures? Why do witnesses separated by oceans and generations describe the same pale passenger, the same sudden vanishing, the same lingering chill in the air? For believers, the answer is simple. Because the phenomenon is real, no matter how unsettling it may be. The legend of the Phantom Hitchhiker remains one of the most enduring in ghost lore because it refuses to stay in the past. It adapts, shifts, and follows us into every new age of travel. Whether it is a lonely figure thumbing a ride on a dark country road, a woman in white stepping into a cab on a rainy night, or a mysterious rideshare passenger with no record of existence, the story never fades. Each new encounter is another reminder that death is not always the end of the journey. Some travelers, it seems, are still searching for their way home. And so every time we pass a figure by the roadside on a deserted stretch of highway, the question arises, is it just a tired traveler, a trick of the shadows, or a ghost waiting for one more chance to share their story? Those who have given that ride will tell you the answer is not easily forgotten. The Phantom Hitchhiker is more than a tale. It is an invitation into the unknown, a lingering presence that keeps the road just a little more haunted, and the night forever filled with whispers.